Look, I think Vladimir Putin just lied to President Trump, and I hate to be the one to have to break this and suggest that the Russian president is less than an honest broker in any way, shape, or form, but that's really the only read I can get from what just played out here. So earlier today, we got these ongoing ceasefire negotiations that the United States is trying to broker between Russia and Ukraine, and President Trump put out a statement on Truth Social where he said, quote, "We had a very good and productive discussion with President Vladimir Putin of Russia yesterday, and there's a very good chance that this horrible, bloody war can finally come to an end. But at this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military and in a very bad and vulnerable position. I've strongly requested to President Putin that their lives be spared. This would be a horrible massacre, one not seen since World War II. God bless them all." Now, we've talked about the situation in Kursk quite a bit on this channel. It's not good for Ukraine. They're also not surrounded, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, this blue area here are Ukrainian forces in Kursk. This area to the left of it is Ukraine. So half of their forces are covered by Ukraine, I guess. So this was actually so far off. There's no assessment that I've seen in the United States or from NATO countries or from Ukraine for that matter. Honestly, even Russia isn't saying that thousands of Ukrainians are encircled here. They're talking about the cauldron and closing in and trying to shut off the exit routes to try to create that scenario. But by all accounts, that's not what it is today. So the Ukrainian armed forces actually stepped in and issued what, a polite correction, maybe is the way to put it, where they said reports of the alleged encirclement of Ukrainian Ukrainian units by the enemy in the Kursk region are false and fabricated by the Russians for political manipulation and to exert pressure on Ukraine and its partners. The situation has remained largely unchanged over the past day. Combat operations within the operational zone are ongoing. Units of the defense forces of Ukraine have successfully regrouped, withdrawn to more advantageous positions, and are executing their assigned tasks within the Kursk region. Now, real quick, there is a little bit of window dressing on that. This is hands down. We've seen Russia on with the initiative in Kursk for a couple days now. This is a withdrawal, a fighting retreat. Ukraine is moving back, and Russia is clearing this area out. So saying that they're moving to more advantageous positions is kind of a nice way of saying we're retreating in the face of a Russian attack. Now, a key point here, the Ukrainian armed forces said, hey, this is fabricated by the Russians to try to exert pressure on us. And one way to read into that is that Putin is telling President Trump, hey, look, we got these Ukrainians surrounded. I could be a nice guy and let them go. And maybe that'll be, something I give you, and maybe you help me out in these negotiations. And this will be the thing that Russia cedes to the United States and to Ukraine for better terms somewhere else down the line. But again, here's the thing. I'm not sure that Russia could encircle the Ukrainian forces right now. If they could, they certainly would want to. They have wanted to from the moment Ukraine moved into Kursk 7 months ago. I'm not sure that's in the cards. Again, if you look at this pocket, it doesn't take a rocket scientist or a serious military strategist to understand that the forces can just move west. Now, some of the areas are harder to move than others, like this road here is in constant danger of being hit with Russian drones. But, there's other areas here, not perfect, but far cry from actually being surrounded. So again, I think Putin maybe, possibly, could have, sort of, just lied to President Trump when talking about the situation on the ground in Kursk. Now, the whole reason this conversation took place was in line with this recent U.S. proposed ceasefire between Ukraine and Russia. A couple days ago, the U.S. threw this out there. Ukraine accepted it, no strings attached. The whole concept is just stop killing each other for 30 days, and maybe we all can sit down and find a path forward to try to find some sort of negotiated settlement to end this war. Maybe it takes 30 days. Maybe you have to extend that to 60 or 90 or 120, or maybe, honestly, it falls apart and we don't get anywhere. But this was a big first step. And it wasn't just an idea by the United States, but Ukraine signed on board as well. And then Russia just kind of sat on it, was the major news yesterday. Putin saying, there's a lot of problems here that I'm not really on board with. We want peace, just not quite like this. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple assessments coming out of the United States based off of that information we got from Russia and President Putin yesterday. The first coming from former National Security Advisor John Bolton. He served in the first Trump administration, but I should note before we play these clips, he's not a fan of Donald Trump. So while he was a part of the team at one point, by all accounts at this point, he is very much in the anti-Trump camp, if you will. Nonetheless, a relative expert in geopolitics, to say the least. So let's give that a listen.
Trump's envoy to handling the situation, who was in Moscow tonight, Steve Witkoff, had a one-on-one or a direct meeting with Putin. We don't know that it was one-on-one. I should be careful to say. We haven't yet gotten a readout. What does that say to you?
Well, I find that very strange because this is something that if there were agreement or if they had narrowed the differences, they would want to make a public announcement to show progress. So I think it must have been more complicated. My take on all this is that what Putin really wants is a conversation directly with Trump. You've had Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, talk to Yuri Yushakov, a former Russian ambassador to Washington. You've now had Witkoff talk to Putin, which, by the way, is a very strange circumstance in and of itself, but with no clear outcome. I think Putin feels he has gotten so much from Trump. The statements that Ukraine will not be restored to its full sovereignty and territorial integrity, Ukraine will not join NATO, Ukraine will not get security guarantees from NATO, and there'll be no security guarantees from the United States. He has no incentive to negotiate with anybody other than Trump. So I think all of this is designed to set up that call that Trump himself wants with Putin so that Putin can get what he wants directly from Trump.
So quick question, was she holding a vape pen or a microphone like that? I feel like I don't see people on TV having to hold a microphone, a little tiny one like that. I'm going to do it with a pocket knife, see if I can remember. But anyways, Bolton hits on a couple key aspects there. Of course, the call that Putin wants with Trump, we now know that played out, but that's only phase one, right? That wouldn't be the end-all be-all of these negotiations. There has been talk for quite a while of the two parties sitting down and actually meeting in person to talk through this. No clear message on when that might be. Both Russia and the United States for quite a while now have said, yeah, we're talking about that. We're getting towards that, but there's no plans quite yet. This call was the first big step, if you will, following the ceasefire acceptance from Ukraine. But then shifting over, the big question we've had about this is if Ukraine accepts and Russia doesn't, what do we do? What's the move then? How do we pressure Russia? What leverage do we have over Russia to try to get them to the negotiating table? And that question was asked of President Trump. Let's give that a listen.
What is your leverage on Putin? Are you thinking sanctions? What if he refuses to?
Well, I do have leverage, but I don't want to talk about leverage now because right now we're talking to him, and based on the statements he made today, they were pretty positive, I think. So I don't want to talk about that. I hope Russia's going to make the deal too, and I think once that deal happens, you're never going to be in a process. I don't think they're going back to shooting again. I really believe if we get a peace treaty, a ceasefire treaty, I think that leads to peace. That's going to really lead to peace. I don't think anyone wants to go back. They've been doing this for a long time.
All right, so yes and no, and I don't know. It's mixed. I keep waiting for more. Like we're going to do something to really push them and get them to the yes in some way, shape, or form. It's still not really clear that we're going to. I did remember the pocket knife, though. I'm still going to do this. So a couple key points from what Trump said there. Look, it's true. Both Russia and Ukraine do want peace. There's nobody in this conflict standing up on the mountain and saying, no, war. I want to keep fighting, keep fighting, keep fighting. Everybody wants peace. The issue is what that peace actually looks like and how you get there. So from Ukraine's side, there's a lot of things they would like to remain a sovereign country, not have Russian missiles and drones raining down over their cities day in and day out, not have an enemy force inside of their own territory. Most importantly to Ukraine at this point, I would say, is probably some sort of security guarantee to make sure that whenever this war does stop, Russia's not just going to be able to restart at some point in the future. Now, another big aspect here would be some sort of territorial control and moving some of those captured territories back to Ukraine. But reading between the lines, it does seem like Ukrainian President Zelensky's kind of moved that off the table recently, recognizing that might not be in the cards right now. Now, from Russia's side, they also want peace, but their peace is control over a significant amount of Ukraine, to include 4 oblasts that they have claimed is now Russian territory, even though they don't actually control all of them. Of course, no Ukraine in NATO, no Ukraine in the European Union, no European peacekeepers, no NATO peacekeepers. Of course, a demilitarization inside of Ukraine and more. So the maximalist war aims for Russia. They want peace, but they just want to win the war to get to peace, if you will. Now let's turn back to John Bolton for one more aspect here, talking about the possible ways that the United States could exert pressure to try to get Russia to the table.
If you were the national security advisor now, what would you say about having a call with Putin right now? Would you say to hold off and let the principals, Secretary of State Rubio, National Security Advisor Mike Waltz kind of do the talking?
Look, the pressure that Trump has put on for a ceasefire is motivated by one thing: Trump's desire for good publicity and to buttress his case to get a Nobel Peace Prize. You want a ceasefire between two warring parties, they need to decide it. There really are legitimate operational questions on the ground. You don't want to jeopardize your own troops' safety. I think Zelensky has it right. He sees this as Putin trying for advantage on the ground. And I think specifically what the Russians want before they agree to a ceasefire is eliminating the remaining Ukrainian troops from the ever-diminishing positions they still hold inside Russia. Then I think he'd be more willing to talk. That could happen within a matter of days.
All right, so again, I think we saw it a little more there, that Bolton clearly doesn't like Trump when he's talking about, like, one of the main reasons that Trump might want to push through to some sort of peace deal is entirely selfish, right? It's just Trump wanting to look good for Trump. But a couple key things that Bolton brought up that I thought were worth reiterating here. First off, the two parties have to be involved. Ukraine and Russia have to talk, and we're still not quite there. So we're getting closer with the United States kind of serving as the mediator and going back and forth. But even in Saudi Arabia, when the ceasefire was discussed, it was the United States talking with Ukraine and then taking that conversation and moving it over to Russia. So to get anything that's a durable peace, even for 30 days, we're going to have those two parties sitting down, talking and finding some way forward. And we're still not there quite yet. The other big piece here that I thought was worth touching on was Bolton saying, you know, one of the major roadblocks here for Russia probably is the Kursk pocket. And we've talked about this before. This is a major issue, a major thorn in the side for Putin and the Russian leadership because, my God, they've been there for like 7 months. 7 months Ukraine has occupied Russian territory. And this is a bargaining chip. And it's one of the arguments as to why Ukraine went into Kursk in the first place, is when you look at this larger map, there's a general idea that Russia probably would be willing to trade this territory in Kursk for something else, right? Probably not all of this territory that they've taken in the south and Crimea, but something, maybe prisoners, who knows what they might give to get this territory back. So if you're Putin and you're sitting in his position right now, seeing that these negotiations are actually moving forward and Trump is pushing them with his team, this all of a sudden becomes a lot more important, to actually close out the Kursk pocket and then come to the table and say, okay, now that we've kind of restacked the deck and now we clearly have the upper hand in a lot of different ways, and that Kursk thing is no longer a big deal, now we're ready to talk, now we're ready to actually look at some sort of ceasefire. I'm still not convinced that Putin will ever agree to a ceasefire in this conflict. It's just not the general way he or Russian leadership has been trending from like day one. But nonetheless, the Kursk pocket is an area to keep an eye on. I would expect to see a continued Russian pressure in that area for quite a while here until it's essentially closed out or Russia runs up against a wall and realizes that they can't push Ukraine out, whichever one of those two might come first. But that's all I've got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.